The history of cycling in the Netherlands. A lot of cities say, but we're not like Amsterdam. We're not the same. We can't plan the same kind of cycle infrastructure that the Dutch might have. But a lot of people forget that Amsterdam and the Netherlands was not always like this. And it goes back a long time. Before the Second World War, there was a seriously high uptake of cycling throughout Europe, but also in the Netherlands. This is an example from Rotterdam, where there was thousands and thousands of bicyclists using a particular bridge every day. And I'm talking 20, 30,000 a day. Then in Amsterdam, a similar vision. Before the introduction of the motor car, the streets were very much a shared space between horses and carriages and pedestrians, cyclists, and all kinds of other activities that happened on the street. Then in the 50s and 60s, after the war, there was a stronger focus on providing for the car, providing parking, providing space where cars could drive unimpeded throughout the streets of Amsterdam. And in more current times, on the third image on the right, we see that there's a bit of a trend reversal there since the 60s and 70s. And Amsterdam is still making improvements to their bike and street network today. But the Second World War was really the pivotal part in this development. Amsterdam, since the 1920s, has been growing significantly through very planned and master planned extensions. Every time there was a big development going on the edge of the city kept growing outwards and outwards, making the distances to cycle longer and longer. And that happened in different waves with different thoughts about what urbanism is and how to create a good urban environment. And after the war, I said it before, the Second World War was pivotal. After the Second World War, the Netherlands had a lot of reconstruction to do. And during that time, unfortunately, I guess, the car was really seen as the vehicle of the future. Building big cities, large scale, with very wide boulevards, a very modernist approach to urban design and architecture, created a very pedestrian and cyclist hostile environment. And we see a lot of those examples still in existence today. The large apartment buildings with the wide streets, a lot of greenery, but very little human interaction, and a very strong focus on car mobility. And we see some examples in the following slides. This is one from the city of Utrecht, where they they dried up the canal, filled it up, and created an urban motorway right through the old city center, just to enable more people to drive to and from the city center, which was seen as real urban renewal and progress for the city. Here's another example from Amsterdam, where there was a similar strive going on towards enabling car mobility through the city. The city actually went so far as to create a plan to build a 4-lane, 6-lane highway from the outside of the city right to the central station. For the people that have been to Amsterdam, it's unimaginable now, but they actually got quite far in this plan. They were building a metro on the right-hand side. You can see the photo of the metro construction, and on top of that metro, they were planning this motorway. And with that, really that focus on building for cars came a rise in car ownership, obviously. You get what you build for. So since the 1920s, 1930s, you see for a long time car ownership being very, very low. And really since the 60s, it starts to rise quite rapidly, and it's still rising today. And with that come all the problems that you have around overuse of cars. At the same time, you see that the bicycle modal share dropped significantly. Not just in the Netherlands, also in other European cities. We see that the bicycle mode share was really, really high, 70–80%, and that dropped quite rapidly in the 1960s. Cities started building car streets, totally focused on getting cars into and out of the city as quickly as possible, thus making it less safe and less desirable to cycle in and out of these cities. And that had a really long-lasting effect that you can see that we still haven't recovered from today. But it's not just bike use that went down. At the same time, as the vehicle kilometers traveled went up, so went the fatalities. On the left-hand side, you see the number of vehicle kilometers traveled in the Netherlands, in number of millions. On the right-hand side, you see the corresponding time frame for traffic fatalities. And you see a pretty meteoric rise from 1,000 in 1950 to about 3,500 in 1972. And that was really the trigger that created a pivotal moment in Dutch urban mobility. These kind of plans, grand plans, this is again in the city of Utrecht, the northern end of that urban motorway that I showed you before. Really large traffic square with a lot of traffic circulation, a lot of circulating lanes, completely different from what it looks like today. But people were really responding to this kind of development. First, everybody thought it was good until they saw the backlash or the negative consequences of these policy choices. In the 1970s, early 1970s, people started to revolt. First quite peacefully with protests to say we need to stop killing our children, stop the Kindermoord, a very famous protest movement, because a lot of children were suffering from the policy choices made in the cities. People wanted more, they wanted their streets back. They wanted the children to be able to play outside without the risk of being run over by a car. And that created a bigger and bigger movement, as I said, first quite peacefully and then a bit more, well, not aggressively in the beginning, but a stronger and stronger movement with protests on the street, people blocking streets, and people trying to send a strong message to the city, well, the people that run the city to stop investing in cars and make sure that the streets are safe for their children. Then a second factor entered the discussion, which was the oil crisis in the 1970s. Because of the oil crisis, people could see that there was an alternative. There was another way to get around the cities. There was no petrol, no gas for the cars, and the government started doing car-free Sundays where people could see what the city looked like without all those cars around. This is a bunch of people having a picnic on a freeway, for example. And that kind of enabled people to be thinking differently about their cities, what they liked about their cities, how places look if not all the cars are racing around the city and causing all the mayhem. And that instilled a sense of change that's still percolating throughout the way we look at our streets in our cities today. This is an example from Amsterdam again, where this was the planned extension of the highway into the city center. This is the street which was almost the last street to make it to a conversion to a major arterial. As you can see, there's about 4 or 5 lanes of traffic here. And that this is the point where the city said, stop, we don't want this anymore. This is how far we'll get, and we're not going to build that motorway, by a 1-vote council majority, by the way. This is the same street today, 1 lane in each direction, a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, wide cycleways in each direction, a very different way of designing your streets. You can see that the building on the right is quite new. That wasn't there before, but that has been brought forward to make sure that the street is not so wide as it was in the past. To mark this occasion of the end of motorway building in the city center of Amsterdam is this monument, which is one of my favorite places in the city. It is a monument depicting a column on top of a turtle that depicts the slow progress of the city. Instead of trying to build things to go faster and faster, accept that things are slow and make sure that the city can deal with that slowness, which I think is a beautiful thought.